What if someone you thought was just a simple taxi driver was actually an angel sent to save you from death? It may seem like something out of a movie or a book, but what if I told you that stories like this happen more often than we imagine? What if, at that moment when everything seemed lost, a mysterious presence silently intervened to change the course of your life? Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you may have been protected by something you didn't see, but felt? Something that gave you peace even when everything around you screamed danger. Many people report experiences they can't explain, encounters with strangers who appear out of nowhere, say exactly what they need to hear, do something decisive, and then simply disappear. These are moments that defy logic, but that touch the soul with a power impossible to ignore. In these stories, the angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they drive a taxi, wear ordinary clothes, and speak with a serenity that calms even the most agitated soul. Have you ever experienced this? In this video, you will hear the impressive story of a young man saved from death by someone who, at first, seemed like just another driver among many. But it only took a few minutes to realize that there was something different about this man. A deep look in his eyes, a silence that spoke more than 1,000 words, a route changed at the last second, and a destination completely transformed. What you are about to discover now may surprise you, perhaps even change the way you see the world around you. Many people talk about divine signs, but not everyone is attentive enough to recognize them. An angel can appear when we least expect it. It can be someone who crosses our path for just a few moments, but leaves an indelible mark. In such a busy world, where spirituality often takes a back seat, these true stories remind us that we are not alone. There is something bigger, there is a plan. And sometimes, when everything seems about to fall apart, it reveals itself in a discreet, almost imperceptible way, but profoundly powerful. Stay with me until the end, because this story will involve you in a way that you may not expect. And if you have ever experienced something like this, you will feel understood like never before. And if you have never been through this, you may start to see the signs in a different light. Because today you will understand what really happens when an angel decides to intervene, even if you only realize it much later. Now, imagine being on your way somewhere, late, distracted, maybe even in a bad mood, and suddenly something, or someone, completely changes the direction of your life. That's exactly what happened to the young man in this story. And what comes next will shake you up. But before I continue, let me ask you something with an open heart. Does this subject make sense to you? Have you ever experienced something similar, where you felt guided, protected, or diverted from a dangerous path by something greater? If so, or even if not, but it touched you in some way, share it here in the comments. Your story may inspire others who are looking for answers, signs, or simply a little hope. Sometimes it is in the story of someone we have never met in person that we find the courage to believe again. If this topic moves you, inspires you, or makes you reflect, please leave a like. It seems like a small gesture, I know, but it helps. This video reach more people who, like you, may need to hear exactly this today. And if you feel that this type of content is good for your soul, subscribe to the channel. Seriously, your presence makes all the difference. With each new story, each new message, we build together a community of faith, spirituality, and real connection. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and continue to spread these messages that often arrive at the right time. Now take a deep breath, because what happened right after that unexpected detour will make you see angels with different eyes. Right after that unexpected detour, something changed deep inside him. It wasn't just the physical change of route that saved him from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was the almost indescribable feeling that an invisible yet intense and present force had taken control at that moment. It's hard to find words that can convey the feeling of when danger passes so close that it seems to have been kept away by a thread, or by a gesture that came from someone who shouldn't have been there, but was. As if that person had been placed at that exact moment by a greater intelligence, a silent presence that acts behind the scenes of reality, far from ordinary eyes. When we mention the word angel, many people imagine ethereal beings with wings and light shining all around them. But the most surprising reports challenge this image. Angels can look like anyone. They could be an elderly man who appears out of nowhere at the bus stop, a woman who holds your hand when everything seems to be falling apart, or a simple man who drives a taxi, says little, but suddenly changes your destiny completely. These manifestations have nothing to do with physical appearance, but with presence, with the silent force that settles within you and makes time slow down, as if the universe stopped for a second so that the miracle could happen. All over the world, these angelic apparitions appear at the most critical moments, exactly when everything seems about to go wrong. It is the second before the accident, the moment before the tragedy, the step before the precipice. The most impressive thing is that these figures disappear soon after, as if they had never been there, without a name, without a record, without an explanation. And as strange as it may seem, it is precisely this absence that makes everything more real. Because when reason cannot understand, the soul understands. The soul feels. Many call this synchronicity. Others prefer the term divine intervention. And there are those who see these moments as a clear sign that we are connected to something much greater than our understanding. Whatever name you give it, what really matters is what remains in the heart. It is that shiver that appears for no apparent reason, the silent certainty that, even though everything seems like a coincidence, it was much more than mere luck. It was purpose. It was protection. It was a hidden truth revealing itself in a subtle, almost secret way. These interventions, even when subtle, have the power to provoke a silent but profound transformation in those who experience them. After experiencing something like this, it is almost impossible to continue seeing the world in the same way. You begin to question what else might be happening around you without you noticing, and you begin to notice small details that previously seemed insignificant. You begin to notice unfamiliar faces that cross your path for brief seconds, words spoken at just the right time, gestures that go unnoticed by others, but that speak directly to your soul. And above all, you begin to cultivate a new mindset, a more attentive, more sensitive look, more connected to the invisible that permeates everyday life. The truth is that many people expect grand, spectacular miracles that come with trumpets and lights in the sky. But the greatest signs almost never come like this. They appear in disguise, simple, human, because perhaps this is exactly how angels choose to act, using everyday language, inserting themselves into our ordinary routine to provoke something extraordinary. And this has a much deeper impact than we imagine, because it shows that the sacred is not distant or inaccessible. The sacred is here, it is now, it is among us, camouflaged in the simplicity of life. What makes it all even more beautiful is realizing that these experiences, although they may seem unique, are not isolated. They are part of an invisible web that connects people from different places, religions, cultures, and life stories. These are stories that repeat themselves with variations in the details, but with a common essence, a force that intervenes, a deviation that saves, a presence that changes everything. This reveals that, regardless of belief or culture, there is something that unites us all, this search for meaning, security, and answers. And when this force manifests itself, even if silently, it is impossible to ignore. The more we look at these stories, the more we realize that there is a pattern, a mysterious, almost secret pattern that begins to reveal itself when we look with an open heart. A pattern that suggests that nothing is by chance, that the encounters, deviations, and small changes are part of a larger, richer, deeper plot than our logical minds can understand. This insight invites us to rewrite the story of our existence, to assume the role of conscious protagonists rather than passive spectators of life. The power of this experience lies in the internal transformation it provokes, not only in those who experience the miraculous moment, but in everyone who comes into contact with this story. This silent transformation is a revolution in the way we see the world, how we make decisions, how we deal with the unexpected. It is an invitation to let go of rigid control, to embrace the fluidity and mystery of life, recognizing that often the greatest miracles happen in what we cannot see, in what we cannot explain but which we feel with our soul. And this change, this openness, is what allows us to live more fully, aligned with a greater purpose, connected to the essence of what is real and true. Because deep down, this journey is about discovering that the invisible is closer than we imagine, that life is an interweaving of forces that go far beyond our immediate understanding, and that when we learn to recognize and trust these forces, we become stronger, freer, and more whole. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If you also feel like you've experienced something similar, or if this topic touches something deep inside you, because behind every intervention there is a real story, with real people, in situations that could happen to any of us. And that is precisely what makes everything even more impactful. Because when we look at life carefully, we realize that the extraordinary can arise in the most ordinary moments, in the routine, in the rush, in the simple act of leaving the house thinking that we are going to live just another normal day. It was just another morning. One of those rushes when the alarm clock rings late, the coffee almost burns in the kettle, and you leave with your clothes half wrinkled because time is against you. He was a young man like so many others, in his early 20s, with his head full of plans, his cell phone buzzing every minute, and an important appointment waiting for him on the other side of the city. His mind was racing, full of thoughts, expectations, and of course distractions. Nothing out of the ordinary. It could be you. It could be me. That day, everything seemed to revolve around a single idea, not being late, and perhaps precisely for that reason, he decided to call a taxi, something he didn't usually do since he preferred to take public transportation or even walk when he could. But something made him open the app and order the car. Details that seem small, almost unimportant, but that, when seen in retrospect, carry a mysterious weight, as if simple, almost automatic decisions were actually part of something much bigger. The car arrived quickly. It was a regular model, light in color, and the driver was middle-aged. Nothing about it stood out. But from the moment the young man got into the vehicle, a different feeling enveloped him. The silence of the driver, far from being uncomfortable, seemed welcoming. The soundtrack was light, almost non-existent, and the atmosphere inside the car conveyed a peace that contrasted with the chaos of the street outside. The journey was proceeding normally, or so he thought. Then suddenly the taxi driver took a turn that was not on the route mapped out by the GPS. The young man, surprised, commented on the detour, but the driver calmly replied, "This way is better." There was something in his voice, firm but calm, that somehow inexplicably made everything seem right, even though it didn't make sense. They drove down streets the young man didn't know, and a subtle uneasiness began to grow. But at the same time, there was a strange trust. It was as if something inside him said, "Trust," and he did. They were only a few minutes off course, but it was long enough for something to happen behind him at the intersection he would have crossed if he had been on the original route, a serious accident with sirens, smoke, confusion. Exactly where he would have gone if he hadn't swerved. His heart raced. The young man looked at the driver as if searching for an answer, an explanation, but the man just smiled slightly as if he already knew. There was no surprise on his face, just serenity. They continued on their journey, and when the young man finally arrived at his destination, still in a state of shock, he turned to thank him. But the car had already disappeared. No record in the app, no license plate number, nothing. It was as if that taxi had never existed. And it is in these kinds of moments that our mind tries to find logic. Did the app fail? Did he not pay attention? But the soul has already understood everything. There are events that escape reason but that touch our inner self directly, because the hidden truth behind these stories is that there are forces working for us, even when we do not realize it. And when they reveal themselves, even if discreetly, they force us to rethink everything, our decisions, our fears, our journey. This story could have happened in any city, to any person, and maybe that's exactly why it speaks so deeply, because it's not about names or places. It's about being in the right place at the right time, for reasons that go far beyond our understanding. It's about realizing that there are times when something leads us down paths that seem wrong, until it saves our lives. The young man was never the same after that day, not because he saw something supernatural, but because he felt it. He felt that he had been cared for, guided, protected. And this feeling, however subtle it may be, changes everything. He began to pay more attention to signs, to coincidences, to brief encounters with people who seemed to know too much. He began to understand that spirituality is not found in grand manifestations, but behind the scenes of everyday life, and that sometimes the greatest revelation comes disguised as routine. And if this story sounds like something that has already happened to you, or reminded you of some inexplicable moment in your life, write it down. I'm on this journey, too. He had left home almost running, with his heart pounding and his mind full of worries. That day seemed to begin with a rhythm of constant urgency, nothing unusual for an ordinary young man in a big city. But that rush, that seemingly insignificant decision to call a taxi, was the trigger that set off a transformation that went far beyond the simple commute. Sometimes life reveals itself in the details we don't notice: the ticking of the clock on the bedside table, the hue of the streetlight, the rush of someone who doesn't even look to the side. And it was in this scenario that he found what would change his destiny. Suddenly, in the middle of that urban chaos, a taxi appeared. There was no identification plate on the app. There was no blinking light. It was as if it had materialized there of its own accord, without warning. The car stopped at the sidewalk, and the door opened in sync with the last ring of the mental alarm clock that insisted on hammering in his head. And there he was, a man in his 50s, with slightly grey hair, a calm and unhurried look, as if he knew exactly where he was and where he was going. One detail caught my attention, something about the way he let the door close, delicately, subtly, without any rush, in an environment where no one waits their turn for anything. "Good morning," the driver said in a voice that was engaging, but not overly friendly. There was a serenity there, as if he was speaking before any thought, straight to the heart. The casualness of that good morning echoed differently. The young man settled into the back seat, and for a moment watched the man in the rearview mirror. There was a magnetic calm there. It was as if that gaze could see beyond the apparent. He dismissed the GPS and, instead of pressing the buttons on the dashboard, took a deep breath, looked at the young man in the back seat and simply said, "Let's go this way, it's better." 3 words that seemed to carry a weight of absolute certainty. Almost a silent advice, but noticeable. The young man, accustomed to controlling every minute of his time, calculating risks every second, preparing responses, felt something break, free from this need for control. His mind, which until then had been occupied with plans and commitments, was surprised by a sudden pause. That simple phrase opened a portal of sensation that he had never felt before on a journey. He did not question. He trusted. He felt that that voice knew, and for a moment he allowed himself to relax. Something rare in a routine governed by deadlines, obligations, and constant decisions. As the taxi cut through back streets and little-known avenues, that silent presence intensified. Every traffic light, every turn, seemed carefully calculated. The silence inside the car was almost comforting, unlike the silence of tension. There was something engaging about the way the driver drove. No rush, no anxiety, no phone calls, no glancing at his watch. It was as if, for a few minutes, his life had been put on pause to observe a reality that would normally pass by at top speed. And then, in the middle of that unexpected journey, the driver broke the silence with a phrase that sounded more like a reminder than new information. Sometimes, the time that seems lost is precisely what saves our day. Simple words, full of meaning, that penetrated the young man's mind like a discreet light at the end of a tunnel. Maybe it was empathy, maybe it was something more, but anyone who hears a phrase like that when they're in a hurry discovers that perhaps your destiny lies in the breaks you didn't plan for. The car was driving down streets he had never seen before, and curiosity began to arise. Where would that route lead? What was the invisible plan unfolding before him? The setting seemed like a backstage scene, a discreet moment that from the outside was just another taxi driving through the streets, but inside was part of a journey that shook up beliefs and perceptions. The young man felt a transformation, albeit subtle, beginning to germinate within him. A break in the control mentality, an opening to the possibility that not everything is under our control, that there are decisions that arrive without asking permission, but that make all the difference. And just when his mind began to open to this new way of seeing life, to the idea that there is a hidden truth behind normality, came the decisive moment. That scenario where chaos and order met, the moment when the original route would have crossed paths with tragedy, but the detour proposed by the mysterious driver avoided the disaster. This was not luck. It was an intervention that escaped reason, an everyday gesture with an extraordinary impact. The young man sat there in the back seat, feeling his pulse return to normal, his thoughts reorganizing, the adrenaline subsiding. He thanked without knowing how, looking at the empty seat in front of him. The driver was simply no longer there. The car was not on the app, as if it were just an illusion, a fragment of reality that delivered a silent revelation that there are forces working behind the scenes of everyday life, inviting us to open our eyes. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, delve into the journey of this experience, and understand how seemingly small decisions, like calling a taxi, following a calm voice, giving up a route, can become the stage for an encounter with the invisible. How this presence, which blends in with the normal, carries within itself the potential to provoke a real transformation, to change our mentality and alter our perception of truth. After all, how many times has our own life been spared by a sequence of events that we would never understand if it weren't for someone willing to guide us along invisible paths? What happened next is not just the conclusion of a journey. It is the opening of a portal to question. Who was that man? What did that moment reveal about the power of presence? And most importantly, how can we learn to recognize when something or someone acts on our behalf, even without our awareness? These are the questions we will explore in the next section. But first, let this sense of transformation settle in. And if you felt something similar, share it in the comments. That makes sense to me. And perhaps the most impressive thing of all is realizing how what seemed like just an ordinary taxi ride ended up revealing a direct connection to something much bigger. Because deep down, we know there are moments in life when everything seems aligned in such a precise way that it is impossible to ignore. And it is in these kinds of moments that many people report feeling an invisible but deeply real presence, as if something or someone was there just to make sure the path was different. A silent detour but full of purpose. And if this subject really awakens something in you, if this feeling that there are signs all around us makes sense, perhaps you want to delve even deeper. I have prepared some material with great care and attention, designed specifically for those who are on this journey of connecting with the invisible. It is something practical, direct, and can open up a new perception about how angels communicate with you in a unique way. The name of this material is Reading Your Birth Angel, and it was created to help you understand the spiritual energy that has been with you since the beginning of your journey. It's like receiving personalized guidance from the angelic kingdom, something that can bring you more clarity when it comes to decisions, doubts, and transformations that you are experiencing right now. If it makes sense to you, take a look at the material I left below. It complements what we talked about here and can save you a lot of time in practice, helping you better understand the signs that sometimes go unnoticed. It's there in the description, but I might take it down in the next few days. So if this theme touched something inside you, take advantage of it while it's still available, because there are things that we feel are for now. And this could be one of those chances to connect more deeply with what's behind what meets the eye. The car drove along the busy city streets, and the young man anxiously watched his watch. With each red light, his anxiety grew. He knew the route by heart. He knew where to turn, which avenues were faster, which intersections were usually congested. And when the taxi driver turned left instead of following the usual route, he felt immediately uneasy. "Sir, it's going to take a lot longer this way," the young man said, trying to remain polite, but with the rush in his voice clear. The taxi driver, however, just smiled in the rearview mirror with that same serene look as before and calmly replied, "We need to avoid certain routes today. Trust me." The sentence hung in the air as if it had more weight than it seemed. The young man wanted to insist, argue, demand that they return to the original route, but something held him back. A strange peace, almost out of place, took hold of him at that moment, as if a part of him knew that something bigger was happening, even without understanding why. This simple decision, a detour, a different turn, seemed to make no rational sense. And yet it carried a silent impact. Behind that steering wheel was not just a seasoned driver avoiding traffic. There was something more, an awareness that went beyond what the eye could capture, a revelation disguised as happenstance. Behind the scenes of that everyday scene, a change of course was also happening within the young man, because often, when everything inside us screams for control, when we want to dictate every step of the journey, there comes a moment when we are forced to let go, to trust. And almost always, it is at that exact point that the transformation begins. A silent internal shift, which changes not only our physical destiny, but the way we look at life. As the car drove away from the familiar path, the young man began to notice details that would normally go unnoticed. The trees in the flower bed, the soft sound of music on the radio, the way the driver seemed to know more than he was saying. It was as if that moment was being carefully constructed for something, and the most curious thing was this feeling that everything had already been planned, as if it were part of an invisible but incredibly precise narrative. How many times in our lives are we led down unexpected paths? How many times does a door close, a delay occurs, an encounter changes everything, and only later do we realize that it saved something, or even saved us? This change of direction has a silent power. It does not immediately announce its importance, but deep down the soul feels it, and often it does not need any further explanation. What seemed like a setback gradually became a revelation. The young man did not yet know what would happen, but he began to understand that there was a hidden meaning to that detour, a truth that could not be seen, but that made a peace resound within. Because when life changes direction, it is not always by chance. Often it is the invisible saying, "It is safer this way." And trusting that voice, even if it has no form or name, is an act of courage. The young man's mindset was adjusting with each passing block, and it wasn't about getting there on time anymore. It was about being on the right path, even if it wasn't the one he would have chosen on his own. There was something special about that route, something that would remind him of that day forever. A silent but memorable experience, a kind of protection that is only felt when the danger has passed. Now, letting this part of the journey sink in a little deeper, right here in the comments, this makes sense to me. Because maybe in the middle of your routine, you've already felt something similar, or you're feeling it now. And sharing this can be the first step to recognizing what is silently trying to guide you. The car drove on in silence, as if every second inside the taxi had a meaning. The young man looked out the window, trying to recognize the route, but everything seemed strange and at the same time, right. It was like walking through a memory that had not yet happened. The discomfort he had felt minutes before, when he noticed the detour, was being swallowed up by an inexplicable peace. But there was something else, an expectation in the air, as if time were holding its breath. And then came the sound. An alert on the car radio that broke the silence sharply. Serious accident on Avenida Norte and Rua San Juan. Traffic completely blocked. Rescue teams are already on site. That information seemed generic, like so much that passes through the news every day. But at that moment it went through the young man like a bolt of lightning. He knew that intersection. It was exactly where he would have passed minutes earlier if he had kept the original route. He immediately looked at his watch. The time was right. Perfectly. The travel time, the distance, everything. He would have been there, in the middle of that impact. The blood seemed to freeze in his veins. It was as if reality was folding in on itself, revealing a layer he had never seen before. And what shocked him the most was not just the coincidence, but the driver's serenity. The man didn't react with surprise, didn't show relief, didn't say anything. He just kept driving, as if he already knew. As if that accident was part of an invisible script that he knew beforehand. The young man tried to find words. He wanted to ask something, anything, but no phrase seemed appropriate for that moment, because it wasn't just about an accident that had been avoided. It was a revelation. The hidden truth behind that journey. Something or someone had decided to intervene, and this awareness hit him hard, causing an immediate internal transformation. A change of mindset, as if he had been torn from an ordinary world and thrown behind the scenes of something much bigger. For a few minutes the silence remained, but it was a heavy silence. The impact of that discovery seemed to echo in every gesture, in every breath. He looked at the driver again, searching the features of that face for some clue. But it was like looking into a mirror without a reflection. The man seemed ordinary, but there was a presence, a calm, a firmness so unusual that the young man could not ignore it. He began to question everything. Who was that man? Why had he chosen that path at that particular moment? And why had he, the young man, been spared? From that moment on, his thoughts began to spiral. It was as if he had suddenly been thrust into a journey of revelations, where destiny was not only a consequence of his choices, but also the stage for interventions that operate beyond logic. With his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, he saw the driver give him a quick glance. It was no ordinary glance, it was as if to say, "You understand." But no sound was made. And that was what was most disconcerting. The silence said more than any words. Because when the soul recognizes a divine touch, it does not need explanations. It needs courage to accept that life is much more than what we can see. At that point, the young man's mind could no longer return to normal. It was as if something had been unlocked within him, a new way of perceiving reality, with more depth, more connection, more purpose. What if that had happened for an even greater reason than just avoiding an accident? What if that moment was the first step in an even deeper transformation? Now, without realizing it, the young man was no longer just living a different day. He was crossing an invisible line between the ordinary and the extraordinary. And in this kind of crossing, logic gives way to faith, to conscious decisions and to listening to what cannot be seen. The impact of that revelation was not only on what had been avoided, but on what was being initiated. Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me." Because when we share what we feel, something aligns inside and outside of us. Now I want to go even deeper into this story, because the presence of that driver, or rather, that angel, still holds details that can change the way you see your own journey. The car pulled gently onto the sidewalk. The young man took a deep breath, still in shock from what he had heard on the radio. The news of the accident on the original route kept echoing in his mind. It was as if he had been pulled from death by an invisible thread, a gesture of silent mercy. Still stunned, he leaned forward a little, ready to thank the driver, but the moment he looked up, the seat was empty. Nothing, nobody. There was no time to hear the door slam, no footsteps moving away, no sound of the engine turning off. It was as if the man had evaporated right there. He blinked in confusion and turned quickly out of the car, trying to find any clue, any sign of the taxi driver walking down the street. But the sidewalk was deserted. There was no one around, not even the car. When he looked again, the entire vehicle had disappeared. His heart began to pound. He spun on his heels, scanning the street. A quiet neighborhood, few people around, no suspicious activity. Everything seemed normal, except for the fact that it just didn't make sense. Where was the car? How could someone disappear like that? Overcome by a feeling that mixed awe and reverence, he walked to the spot where he believed the taxi had stopped. He ran his fingers through his pocket, pulled out his cell phone and tried to recall the model of the car, the license plate, some detail. But everything seemed blurry, as if his mind was trying to forget something that was not of this world. That was when he decided to ask a man who was sweeping the sidewalk a few meters ahead. "Did you see a taxi stop here a little while ago?" he asked, his voice still cracking. The man stopped for a moment, looked around and then at the young man. "I didn't see any taxis, son. This street has been closed for a long time." The answer came like a second blow. A thick silence fell over him. Reality seemed to fold before his eyes. He tried to rationalize, but deep in his heart something deeper whispered, what had just happened was not common. It was not logical. and it was not of this plane either. When he walked home that night, each step felt heavy. His mind whirled, trying to sort it all out. How could he explain something like this? How could he tell someone about this without sounding crazy? But a part of him knew he had been chosen, spared, preserved, and for a reason that might yet be revealed. In the following days, he tried to find records of the car. He searched for similar license plates, travel times, and transportation apps. Nothing. None of the data matched. There was no record of a taxi with those characteristics traveling on that street at that time. And the most curious thing, the very place where he got off seemed to have no security cameras, as if that moment had been carefully erased of any material trace. This type of revelation usually marks a journey. From that point on, everything changes. The way we see life, the value of small decisions, the sensitivity to recognize the signs that spirituality sends. Because when something inexplicable happens before our eyes, either we ignore it and carry on as if it were a coincidence, or we allow ourselves to open our eyes to something much bigger, something that has always been there, waiting for the right moment to manifest itself. That's when the transformation begins. Because recognizing a miracle is like activating a new level of consciousness. It's as if the world stops being just what meets the eye. You start to perceive the backstage of reality, the hidden truth behind appearances. And when that happens, when that kind of portal is opened, there's no turning back. It's a change of mindset that touches every area of life. This story, which might seem like a mere anecdote, turns out to be a turning point. Because it's not just about a taxi. It's about the impact that an invisible presence can have. It's about the subtlety with which the divine moves, and about the courage to admit not everything that exists can be proven. But some things, even without proof, are absolutely real. Comment, "This makes sense to me." Now I want to explore further what this experience can teach us about invisible connections, silent signals, and the power of seemingly small decisions. It's amazing to think about how many times we go through life surrounded by signs and small miracles that we simply don't notice. How many times do we miss, in the rush of everyday life, that moment of silence, or that strange sensation that tries to alert us to something bigger? The truth is that many times, angels don't arrive with visible wings or resounding trumpets. They act subtly, almost like discreet shadows that cross our path and disappear before we can really understand what happened. It's a presence that transcends common logic, a force that operates behind the scenes of our existence, guiding decisions, protecting lives, and impacting our journey in ways that we can only grasp when we allow ourselves to look beyond the obvious. This encounter that the young man experienced is not an isolated case. On the contrary, stories like this echo in different cultures, religions, and personal accounts around the world, showing that there is something or someone that silently intervenes when we are about to make crucial decisions or face imminent dangers. The mindset we adopt when faced with these events can completely transform the way we perceive our reality. It is a matter of making room for intuition, faith, and that hidden truth that, although not in our eyes, lives in the heart and sensitivity of those who are willing to feel. Decisions sometimes are the result of something greater than our reason can understand, and recognizing this is allowing a genuine transformation in our journey. The impact of this perception goes beyond simply recognizing a supposed angel. It involves understanding that protection and guidance are available to everyone, even if invisible. It is an intimate journey, a revelation that changes the way we see the world, ourselves, and the circumstances around us. Feeling this deep connection requires a change in attitude, getting out of autopilot, slowing down, observing the details that previously went unnoticed, and most importantly, trusting in the invisible. It is precisely this trust, fueled by faith, that gives us the courage we need to face challenges and see the true messages behind events that seem like simple coincidences. Imagine how many times we ignore this invisible energy simply because we don't understand its language. The mysterious taxi driver wasn't just a driver, he was a symbol of what we often can't explain, but which saves us. He brings to light the notion that in the midst of our daily decisions there may be a force that acts in secret without imposing itself but that never abandons us. This idea may seem far-fetched to some, but the truth is that spirituality is more present than we imagine, shaping our lives with delicacy and precision, sometimes in an unexpected detour, other times in a moment of silence. If we think of faith as a lens that magnifies the invisible, we realize that it offers us a different perspective, capable of seeing beyond appearances and connecting with this hidden dimension. Spiritual intuition then becomes a kind of radar that alerts, protects, and guides us, a precious internal resource that we can cultivate to transform our mindset and face life with greater clarity and serenity. This deep connection does not depend on complex rituals or specific beliefs, but on the sincere willingness to welcome what cannot be touched but can be felt. And that is where the beauty of this encounter lies. It did not come with explanations. It did not seek to be understood immediately, but it left a mark on the young person's heart, a seed planted that, little by little, can germinate into a new way of seeing and experiencing reality. It is not just about a taxi driver or a detour. It is about the revelation that, even in the most banal choices, we are immersed in an invisible web of care and purpose, a truth that transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. This realization can open doors to a more conscious journey, where each decision takes on new weight, each step can be guided by a greater wisdom, and each moment begins to carry a deeper meaning. It is natural to feel a mixture of doubts, curiosity, and even disbelief when faced with this type of experience. After all, we are used to trusting only what we see, what we can prove. But it is precisely in this space, between the visible and the invisible, that the true magic of existence resides. It is a delicate dance between reason and feeling, science, and spirituality, logic, and mystery. Understanding that not everything needs to be immediately unraveled is an important step towards accepting the complexity of life and the role of angels, or any protective force, in our personal history. Looking at this story with an open mind can reveal unexpected behind-the-scenes details of our own lives, showing us that the details we consider insignificant are actually fundamental pieces in the puzzle of our transformation. Every detour, every unexpected encounter, every sense of peace, even in the midst of irritation, is a clue that, if understood, can help us better navigate life's twists and turns. This hidden truth, when uncovered, has a profound impact that goes far beyond the immediate moment. It influences our entire journey, leaving a legacy of trust, hope, and connection. Understanding this does not mean that all questions will have clear answers, but that we can start paying attention to what really matters, what touches us, what elevates us, what drives us to seek a life with more meaning. This search, in turn, is an ongoing transformation, an invitation to rethink our mindset, our decisions, and the way we see the world around us. It is a movement that is built day by day, made up of small, silent miracles that, when recognized, have the power to change everything. If this reflection resonated with you, I invite you to share in the comments a word or phrase that represents what you felt when you heard this story. Comment below. This makes sense to me. Your story can not only strengthen this community, but also illuminate the journey of other people who are searching for answers between the lines of life. And as we continue to unravel this fascinating truth together, we will delve even deeper into the mysteries surrounding these invisible encounters and the impact they have on our existence. Not every hero wears a cape. Sometimes he puts on a simple taxi driver's cap and drives, attentively and carefully, to save a life without anyone noticing. This seemingly simple phrase carries an almost invisible depth in the whirlwind of everyday life, when the noise of routine and incessant pressures make us forget the value of small things. What many don't realize is that the impact generated by a seemingly trivial action, an unexpected gesture, a decision that goes beyond the usual, an unexpected detour, can not only save a life, but trigger a series of invisible connections that cross destinies and shape futures. We are surrounded by these silent heroes, invisible guardians who, without knowing it, star in decisive chapters in the history of those who cross their path. The story we have just shared is not just about a different path or an accident that was avoided by mere chance. It is an invitation to look beyond the surface of events and make room for the transformation that occurs when we allow forces greater than our logical mind to guide our steps. The mindset of those who live this way, attentive to the signs that the universe sends, willing to trust intuition and perception beyond the obvious, reveals itself to be a powerful key to accessing hidden truths and connecting with what really matters. Decisions that previously seemed trivial and insignificant take on new meaning. They reveal that life is a sequence of encounters, detours, and revelations that, together, shape the path we follow. When we look back on this experience, we realize that its impact goes far beyond the exact moment the taxi driver changed the route. It calls us to reflect on the behind-the-scenes aspects of our own existence, on the choices we make consciously, and those that seem made for us, as if by an invisible alignment of fate. Each detour, each step off the expected route, carries with it the promise of something new, an opportunity for growth and learning that often escapes our immediate understanding. The real key is to develop a sensitivity that allows us to recognize these moments, learning to accept that the journey is not just about controlling everything that happens, but also about welcoming the unexpected with courage, faith, and an open heart. These reflections challenge us to expand our minds and hearts, to question what we have always believed about chance, destiny, and luck, and to understand that behind the apparent monotony of routine, there is a subtle and powerful plot that connects each moment in surprising ways. This invitation to transformation is profound and goes far beyond what our eyes can capture. It invites us to recognize the value of the small miracles that occur silently, in silence all the time, but that we can only perceive when we change the way we see the world around us. This change in mindset has the power to revolutionize not only the way we make decisions, but also how we face life's challenges, transforming fear into confidence, uncertainty into a new opportunity for learning and overcoming. Now, I want to take you on an even deeper dive into this topic so that we can explore together how to cultivate this perception in our daily lives, how we can become conscious protagonists of our own journey and learn to listen to the signs that the universe, in a silent and mysterious way, sends us. This awareness, when incorporated as a real practice, goes beyond inspiring stories and begins to directly influence our way of living, bringing more authenticity, more alignment with our purpose, and a more intense connection with everything around us. It is a key that opens a new dimension of existence, where the invisible becomes palpable and where the hidden truth, previously hidden, reveals its transformative power. This realization is, without a doubt, an invitation to open ourselves to new possibilities, a true internal revolution that drives us to live more fully, more consciously, and more integrated with the natural flow of life. Understanding that each encounter, each choice, and each deviation are part of a great movement helps us to recognize the role we play in this vast scenario and the importance of remaining attentive to the details that often go unnoticed, but carry the power to transform us. It is a call for us to develop a mindset that values the invisible, that trusts intuition, and that knows that what is not seen does not mean that it does not exist or that it does not have an impact. Comment. That makes sense to me. This simple phrase can be the beginning of a profound exchange, a space where we share our experiences, discoveries, and revelations that have the power to touch and transform lives. The beauty of this journey is in recognizing that we are not alone, that there is a network of protection, support, and love that goes far beyond what our eyes can capture. And it is precisely this network that sustains and guides us, allowing us to also be a light for those who cross our path, who also need, at some point, a hero who appears when we least expect it, even if he comes with a taxi driver's cap and a simple smile ready to lead us to salvation. Getting this far means that this story and everything we've shared had a real impact on you, that these reflections didn't just remain superficial, but rather awakened something inside, a desire to see the world and your own life in a different way, more open and full of meaning. And it's exactly this kind of connection that makes all the difference, because When we allow ourselves to dive into these experiences, when we make room to understand that transformation is much more than what the eyes can see, we begin to perceive a new universe, full of possibilities and unexpected encounters. So if you felt that this content touched you in some way, that it brought an insight or a new perspective to your journey, I want to invite you to stay closer, because what's coming will only deepen this conversation and help you build a mindset that's even more aligned with everything that really matters in life. If this video made sense to you, if the story spoke directly to your heart, a good way to show that you made it to the end and that you are on this journey with me is to leave a simple phrase in the comments such as, "I'm with you until the end," or "This message was for me." These words help to create a space where we share experiences, strengthen this invisible network that connects us, and encourage more and more people to seek this different perspective on everyday life, on signs, on the small, big decisions that make all the difference. And look, if during this time you felt this connection, this desire for more people to benefit from this content, leaving a like here on the video is a natural and loving way to show that this connection exists, that this message resonated, and that we are together on this journey of discovery and growth. The content here is designed specifically for those who want to go beyond the superficial, for those who seek not only answers, but also new questions, for those who want to understand the behind the scenes of their own lives and learn to navigate with more courage and awareness. So if you are enjoying this type of conversation, stay with me because there is much more to come, with stories, reflections, and revelations that will continue to fuel this transformation and broaden your perception of what is possible to live and feel. And to continue this journey, there is a video here that complements this subject in a very special way. Click it, follow me there, and let's continue this journey together, discovering how to be the protagonists of our own story, and finding meaning even in the simplest things that happen around us. Take it easy, take your time whenever you want, because this is your space to learn, get inspired, and truly connect. It is like this, step by step, conversation by conversation, that we build something that goes beyond the obvious and that transforms our way of seeing the world and ourselves. So, let's move forward on this journey, because the best is yet to come, and I really want you to be part of this discovery.